Good evening, DSU student body and faculty. This evening we'll be presenting the debate for the position of Vice President Internal. I'm your moderator for the evening, Mark Joycey. Before we get started, here are a few announcements. First, and most important, we recognize that we are holding this debate on unceded, unsurrendered Mi'kmaq land. Second, we would like to thank the tea room and the staff for allowing us to host this debate, as well as those who are broadcasting this to the general public through the DSU. Tonight, this debate is about the discussion of ideas and actions that help make the DSU, and more importantly, the students, have a positive time here at Dalhousie University. Each candidate here is running to help improve the well-being of all students here at Dal. There will be agreement and disagreement here on stage on how to reach these objectives. Candidates have every right to disagree and argue about ideas and actions, and we encourage healthy debate. We do not encourage attacks on each other or other groups of people in a way that is discriminatory or offensive. Those who attempt to engage in this behavior, including those in the audience, as deemed by the moderator or members of the executive committee, will not be tolerated. In addition, candidates must address the moderator in their responses. Candidates cannot engage other candidates or members of the audience. Candidates are not to cut off other candidates and must wait for the moderator to address questions to them. Questions will be taken from the audience and read by the moderator. Questions can also be submitted in advance via this online web forum. Audience are to be silent except for cheering or clapping. Spokespersons for referendum campaigns can opt to deliver a short speech before the commencement of debates. All candidates are obligated to follow the university policy as well as municipal, provincial, and federal laws in the course of campaigning as per the DSU Elections policy. I understand we have those who are from CKDU and Ennisburg that would like to speak on the referendum. If one of them would like to come up now, they're welcome to do so.
Hi, my name is Daryl. I'm from CKDU. The last time I was here, I think I played on this stage, and that was 5 or 10 years ago. But yeah, I'm here from CKDU. We are running a levy campaign in this election. Sorry if I'm cutting you guys off. We haven't received a levy increase since 1985, which was when we started. So we are looking to increase our levy. We are asking for $1 more per term per student. If we are successful in achieving this levy, we're going to use it to hire student podcasters, student programmers, and student coordinators. So the idea is to pump that money back into student content that is relevant to students, created by students. We would love to have anybody ever from here come check us out on the 4th floor of the Student Union building. I think also maybe a good idea would be for us to have a Sexton campus show where we could get some reports from Sexton about what's going on down here. Thanks for listening to me. My name's Daryl. I'm from CKDU.
Thank you. And now we have the spokesperson from Ennisburg.
Hello, it's good to be back at Sexton. It was my campus. I spent 3 years doing my master's in civil engineering, and I think I was, in last decade, I was the only exec from Sexton in DSU exec, so that was great memory, and we had done a lot, and I hope whoever wins in this panel and other panels all will continue to do the good work. And why I'm here, I'm representing Ennisburg. Ennisburg is Nova Scotia Public Interest Research Group. And we're asking for a levy increase of $1.5 per student per term. And the mandate of Ennisburg is for social and environmental justice in an anti-oppressive framework. And we have lots of resources. We help students in research, in action, in whatever capacity is possible. But in recent times, what happened, we have a lot of requests from students and community groups to support for more events, more programs, and with a limited capacity, that's not possible. So that's why we're asking for a small increase so that we can increase the staff hours to increase the capacity. We can hire a couple of students, part-time staff, and increase the grant we allocate for the community and the student groups. And that's why we can continue whatever the good works are doing. We have alternate orientation. We have recently had an Inspire campaign, which is great. We had 100 students. A lot of them were from Sexton. And I think just check out NSPERC Facebook page, and I will encourage everyone to vote yes, and just spread the word. Vote yes for NSPERC. Thank you.
Thank you. Now on to debate itself. All candidates have read the rules for the debate and agreed upon them before participating. Candidates will get 2 minutes max for opening statements. Questions will be asked by myself based on questions I have written or have been presented to me by the student body. A question will be asked to one of the candidates. The candidate will get 60 seconds to respond. Every other candidate will get 60 seconds to rebuttal or respond. Then there will be a max 5-minute discussion between the candidates on the issue of the question, depending on if it's relevant. And if need be, follow-up questions by myself. Candidates will be respectful of others during speaking during this time. The order of candidates giving opening statements has been determined at random. Veer, you are first.
Thank you. So thank you all for showing up. My name's Veer Gandhi, and I'm running for VPI, as you all know. One of the things I was mostly concerned about, and that really pushed me to campaign for this position, is the fact that, like, in last year's polls, only 13% of Dalhousie students were actually voted during the elections. So for me, that's a really big concern, because a lot of students pay a lot of money, and that gets to like millions of dollars when you accumulate it together. And it's important that, like, something as important as the DSU, something that can be as effective as the DSU, that, like, students should be engaged more with it. And that's basically my platform. I'm hoping to get as many people involved with the DSU and get as many people engaged with the DSU as many as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Samuel.
Hi, my name's Samuel Eisner. I'm running for VPI as well. And I'm running because I see a real divide on campus, especially between the general student population and the DSU. This can be seen not only by low voter turnout, as Veer pointed out, but also as in general apathy towards the DSU on campus as an organization. And you can see this not only by that low voter turnout, but also just by talking to students on campus. When asking about the DSU, when I first decided to run, attitudes towards the union ranged from being confused because they didn't really understand what it did, to outright upset. And that is not only an embarrassment, but that upsetness can lead to problems, and that's actually unsafe. To fix this, a couple things need to happen. First, the DSU needs to be a lot more transparent. Social media generally goes untouched and underused. Emails are sparse, and students aren't really ever explained what the DSU is outside of O Week, nor do they interact with it. In fact, for many students, that O Week is the only interaction they'll ever have with the union, and that's really sad. Secondly, the DSU needs to be more accountable. That means holding regular referendums, and not only on how the DSU is doing, but also if students are okay with the decisions that the DSU are making. It means electoral reform. There's no reason why students should be allowed to campaign in the library. There's no reason why we aren't allowed to have whatever size handbills we'd like. And lastly, most importantly, it means an apolitical DSU, one that doesn't pick sides on issues, leaving students alienated by a system that they have no choice but to pay into. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Annie.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Annie Shannon Dwyer. I'm running for the DSU VPI position. I just want to thank everyone that made it out today, as well as those who are watching the live stream. The reason why I wanted to run for the DSU and kind of a bit about my platform here is just about making a difference on campus, not only by myself, but by all of those who surround me. So every campus throughout the Dalhousie that I want to see change happen. So I want to work with improving resources on all campuses, and that means making the ones that are already used known. And then I also want to work on connecting the different campuses together, so working with societies that are on Sexton campus to work with those on Studley as well as those on Truro and Carleton. I myself, throughout my work experience as well as my university degree, have had experience working throughout the different campuses, and they all have something unique to offer. My third point as well is just to turn ideas into action. So primarily through my work, I've had a really unique perspective on seeing the actions that students want to see happen. And unfortunately, a lot of this is impacted by financial barriers. So I really want to work with societies on increasing grant applications and bursary applications, as well as training those skills so that students and societies can put aside funding for when students have those ideas so they can flourish into action. Once again, I just want to thank all of you for coming, and that's a bit about me.
Thank you. Mitch, you are next.
Hey everyone, my name is Mitch Mulhall. We're all here tonight running for the Vice President internal position. So I'm in my third year of biochemistry here at Dalhousie. The reason I ran for DSU this year was because I wanted to get more involved on campus and get more involved with what the DSU does in general. I find there's a general lack of knowledge about the DSU and what the DSU does. Even though there's a lack of interest in the DSU, people have a disdain towards the DSU, but they're never willing to get involved. So I wanted to help step up, help get the word out there about what the DSU is, and really try to get students more engaged and more involved. The three things that I really like to focus on are accessibility, engagement, and support. Accessibility in terms of the resources that the DSU currently has on its main campus, but also helping to spread those resources out to more societies and to our other campuses, making these resources more well-known for students and easier to access. The second is engagement. Engagement with students on campus to really have them care about what the DSU is doing and really looking into and having their voice heard. This engagement would work through outreach with other DSU executives, through events, through societies, and through events on campus. And third would be support. Support for those societies and those student groups that are looking to get involved on campus but don't really know how. How to set up a new society, how to support the societies that are already there, and how to help them use the resources that the DSU has to offer. So yeah, my name is Mitch, and that is the reason that I'm running for VPI this year. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ali.
Could you just repeat the question, please?
It's just an opening statement.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. My name is Ali Barnaby. I am a... Can everyone hear me? I just want to make sure. No? Okay.
That mic doesn't
This better?
go there.
All right, great. Thank you. So hi, everyone. My name is Ali Barnaby. I'm a second-year political science student here at Dalhousie University. I joined the Dalhousie community in 2014 through the transition year program offered through the College of Continuing Education here at Dal. So I'm really excited to be here tonight to inform you a little bit more about my campaign. However, I'm going to leave this introduction just, short and sweet just so that we can get into the more details. Thanks.
All right, thank you. So we're going to start with questions now. The first few questions have been written by myself, and we're going to start with Mitch first, and then everyone has a minute to respond. So Mitch, why are you the most qualified for this position?
Thank you, Mark. I think I'm the most qualified for this position because I bring a new perspective to the DSU. I've held many leadership positions within groups and societies on and off campus, but I've never formally held a position within the DSU or on council. Never having been involved with council or the inner workings of the DSU this past year, I will bring a new and diverse opinion to the table. I will be able to relate with the students on campus that feel that they were not represented this past year. I feel like this new perspective will help challenge the way that things are done, to relook at the current protocols we have in place, and really look at where students want support on campus.
Thank you. Ali, you're next. Same question.
Okay. So the VPI position deals with the internal administrative aspects of the Dalhousie Student Union. I believe I'm the most qualified for this position because of my past work experiences, both on and off campus. I have relevant work experience in office administration, consultation and accommodation, as well as policy and governance. This year, I've been doing a lot of work in helping rebuild a sense of community within the Indigenous community at Dalhousie University. I'm currently being recognized for the work that I'm doing on campus through the Rising Star Impact Award. This award is selected and given to first, second, and third year students who have demonstrated outstanding levels of commitment, leadership, creativity, and innovation to the DSU as well as the campus community at large. So this is something that I want to bring to Dalhousie Student Union. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Samuel, you're next.
Okay, so I think that I'm the most qualified person for this job for a couple reasons. Firstly, my academics. I'm a Dean's List student. I have been since my first semester at Dal, so yay. But I'm also doing a double major in history and political science. I'm someone who truly believes in doing things based on evidence. And looking back at history, you can figure out pretty much every single situation has already happened, and we've seen the consequences. My political science helps me interact with people and learn how politicians work. And my second part is my work experience. I'm a cook by trade, and that means that on a regular basis, I'm dealing with people in their most stressed out situations. Obviously, as VPI, I'd have to interact with all of the other executives, but also the entire student body as whole, as well as societies. So I think that would help me with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Annie, you're next.
Awesome. So I think that I am the most qualified for this position because, like some of my other candidates here, I have work experience both on and off campus. I've also lived both on and off campus, which has also given me a unique perspective in what it's like to be a student here at Dal. Another thing I have as well is my extensive work experience. Just in my years here at Dal, I've worked for the university all 3 years, which has been an amazing experience. I've worked with students in their residence buildings as well as off-campus student engagement, which has given me a unique way of seeing the way that societies and administration runs here at Dal. I think that my primary skills in outreach and engagement with the student body as well as my ability to communicate well would also serve as a great tool for this position. I, too, as students, look for someone in the executive team who is relatable, so I just feel that I would be that for students. Thank you.
Thank you. Veer, same question.
Thanks. So I believe that I'm most qualified for this position for 3 main reasons. I've come up with an acronym called CAP, C-A-P, C for communication, A for adaptability, and P for perseverance. So I believe that I have superior communication skills because first I can speak 6 languages, and I've debated for almost a decade. Communication also requires you to listen to the other person, and growing up in a myriad of cultures and different ideas and opinions has allowed me to understand people better. The second thing I'll talk about is adaptability. So that is, 2 years ago, I switched high schools and went to a country I'd never really been to before for boarding school, and a school I'd never really seen before. And that, like, the whole culture and the ideas and the motives and the methods of thriving in those environments were totally different. And that has allowed me to adapt. And this brings me to my third point, which is perseverance, which is important to thrive in any different environment.
Thank you. All right, candidates, we're going to move on to the next question. And this will be Ali to start. So, Ali, what is the greatest issue that the VP internal is in charge of, and how do you plan to address it?
So the greatest issue that the VPI is in charge of is communications. I believe that communications with the DSU can be greatly improved throughout this year. However, I've also identified other issues that the VPI profile would be a useful tool or a useful position to address. So communications, bridging the gap between campuses and involvement. So for me, I've identified bridging the gap between campuses as being the most important on my agenda if I were to be elected as VPI. I believe that this is the most important issue because this is how we are going to increase involvement within the DSU as well as reach as many students as possible. By including students on a grassroots level of going out and talking to them like face to face, I think that that would be our best strategy.
Thank you. Samuel, same question.
Okay, so for me, what I've seen speaking to students, the greatest issue that I as VPI face in terms of communications is definitely going to be addressing societies and making sure that they have DSU support. I've spoken to several society leaders, both res councils and random student societies like the Engineering Society, Computer Science Society, and they have said that one of the hardest things that they have to do is interacting with the DSU and trying to get support from them. And that's a pretty easy fix for me. Just being present, being aware, and listening and responding to all sorts of communications that I get. I'd also add addressing students to that, but if we're just talking the greatest issue, it's going to be societies.
Thank you. Annie, same question.
Yes, I think our greatest issue on Dal campus, specifically when it comes to the DSU, is a matter of showing up and being present for the students. I think that that encompasses communication and those other issues that our fellow candidates did mention there. I think that we need to be recognized as DSU executives, not because you look our faces up on the internet, but because you know us on an organic level. So what I want to do is I want to be there for students and I want to be present. And one way that I could do that for all campuses is making sure that there's office hours across campuses, not just on Studley, but for Carleton, Sexton, Truro. I want to be there for students, and I want to host office hours, and I want to have those conversations so students don't know my face because they find me on the DSU website, but because they know me as a person. Thank you.
Thank you. Veer, same question.
So in my opinion, one of my colleagues already mentioned it, but the biggest issue right now is probably like the really low engagement, especially with societies and the overall student body. So my goal would be to like use the techniques that I'm using right now to get people, to ask people to vote for me, and use them to like let them know that the DSU is there, and like reiterate the responsibilities of my position as VPI, and all the things that the DSU is supposed to do for the people to ensure that there's maximum people being engaged with the DSU.
Thank you. And Mitch, same question.
So when I look at the greatest issue that our position is in charge of, I really think of communications and the ways in which we engage with societies. One of the major roles under the VPI portfolio is these societies and these student interest groups on campus. I think societies are really a big part of what makes student life and student involvement here at Dalhousie. Part of the major interaction that students have through their societies with the DSU is through the role of the VPI, and we want this interaction and this engagement to really be a positive one. I feel like I am a very good candidate to be able to make this interaction with societies a positive one, to be able to find ways to support them better, so that students can really get the most out of their university experience, the most out of the DSU, and the most out of their society interest groups.
Thank you. All right, candidates, we will move on to the next question. And it will be Ali that will be the first one to speak to this. Was it? Oh, again? Yeah. Okay, sorry. Samuel, sorry. I want to make sure that everyone gets the amount of time that they need. So, Samuel, what is the biggest challenge that you will face personally holding this position?
I think that the biggest problem that I'm going to be facing as VPI, and I've already encountered this somewhat, is repairing the relationships between DSU executives and alienated students in our communities around them. I've had students express both disdain and upsetness when I've mentioned that I'm running for the DSU, and that obviously means that they've been either alienated or experienced things they didn't like in relation to the DSU. So fixing that and making sure that they know that they actually are being represented, that they are safe on campus, and that that I'm here to work for them is going to be definitely difficult but necessary.
Thank you. Annie, same question.
So I think my biggest challenge in this position would be really to be able to communicate on a personal level to students that have experiences that aren't necessarily the same as mine, but in a way that it's organic. So I want to be able to communicate with students and listen. So I want to take a step back and allow students to communicate with me what they want to share. And for me, that's the most important thing as a VPI or any executive, is to be able to take a step back and be able to let the voices be heard and to not speak for others. And I think that that would be the biggest challenge in the sense of the position, but I feel like that's something that I am able to do well. So thank you.
Thank you. Veer, same question.
So for me, the biggest challenge, if I became VPI, would be that like there's no one single way to reach out to all the 20,000 students across campus. There's also different societies. Some are big in numbers, some are small in numbers, and sometimes they may not always feel that they're represented properly or fairly. So I think getting the message across, there wouldn't just be one platform, and I think I'd have to use multiple platforms to try to get the message across and like try to inform people that like we're here for you, like the DSU is here for you, through as many platforms as possible.
Thank you. Mitch, same question.
I think one of the biggest challenges coming into a role like this is that you're on a stage at a university level. You're on a stage that brings many expectations from students, faculties, and your other DSU executives. I feel like the biggest way to work with these expectations is to really reach out and see what students want. Without being able to bridge that gap between students, having those conversations and communicating with them to find out what they want, we'll really never be able to get down to any of the issues that societies and students on campus face. So really being able to bridge those gaps and have those conversations and that communication with students to find out what more they want to see out of the DSU and what they currently aren't getting.
Thank you. And Ali, same question.
For me, one of the biggest challenges I feel like I would face in this position is determining what kind of resources societies need in order to become the best versions of themselves. The reason why I say that I would struggle with this is because there's going to be a lot of different competing needs. So I have an idea of introducing please let me restart. So like one thing that unifies us together as a community is that we're all students first. So one thing that I want to do is to help relieve the pressure off of student society leaders by creating a bookable resource of part-time staff where societies can book administrative support to help plan and coordinate their events. That would relieve a lot of pressure off of student society leaders like myself, so that students have more time to pay attention to their studies versus having to make that really difficult choice on whether or not they should get a worse mark in one class
Thank
or
you.
create.
Thank you. Samuel, same question.
I already answered that question.
Yeah, you're right. Sorry about that.
I could say it again.
Fair enough. So, Annie, the next question is to you. How do you reach out to all members of the student union with the position of VP internal?
Sorry, can you repeat it one more time? I missed the first little bit there.
Of course.
Thanks.
How will you reach out to all members of the student union as VP internal?
Of course. So I think what Veer said really eloquently earlier was that it's not just through one platform, it's through many platforms. Students vary in age, in 1,000 things, and it's the best way to reach out to all students is to use the various platforms. One thing that I'm super comfortable with is social media, and I think that that's a great way to outreach to students, and as well as engage students, have interactive social media platforms that those students can engage not only between themselves and the DSU, but to other students as well, and making those connections throughout and across campuses. So social media is one. Really working on the website would be another. That's more experience I have at work was renovating websites, as well as some other things like those organic relationships. I don't know everyone, as well as no executives know everyone, but that's what I find is so important is by fostering those good communications between student to student. Executives can be that liaison between myself as well as the student body. Thank you.
Thank you. Veer, same question.
I believe that to address the whole student body, or to communicate with the whole student body, the most effective way would probably be using the platforms that we're using right now to ask people to vote for us and spreading our campaign. So by using these same things that people see and then they choose to vote, and using these as information to tell people what the DSU is about, what the DSU does, and everything, I think that would be a really effective way to address the student body.
Thank you. Mitch, same question.
Can you please repeat the question?
Of course I can. How will you reach out to all members of the student union as VP internal?
Perfect. Thank you. I will reach out to all. Excuse me. I'll reach out to all the members of the student union through campus-specific office hours and through hosting society open forums. With these campus-specific office hours, I will commit to being present on all of our campuses so that students may be able to have the same access to the vice president internal as a resource for those current societies and also for societies that are looking to become ratified and set something up. Hosting society-specific office hours will give societies a chance to have that one-on-one interaction with the vice president internal in terms of planning their events, organizing the events, or using the resources that the DSU has. In the month of September, I would also like to make myself open to attend any society meetings in residences or other societies to help them get on track right away and get those societies ratified in the first coming months of the year so that they may be on track and on a good start for the semester.
Thank you. Ali, same question.
My plan to reach out to all students of the union would be to be accessible as possible. I really think it's important to be a proactive member of this relationship between the union and societies. As a vice president internal, I want to work with societies on a face-to-face level, so moving beyond emails, moving beyond social media, but actually showing up to events and going and participating and helping in any way that I can. Of course, there's 365 societies currently ratified with the DSU, and it's likely that that's only going to grow. And in reality, I might not be able to do that. However, it's making yourself accessible as much as possible. So really just being there and making a proactive effort and making things better.
Thank you. And Samuel, same question.
So I have a couple plans for how I'd like to interact with students, all students. First of all, echoing what others have said, social media is a huge part of my life, and it will continue to be as part of VP. I know like the DSU already has Twitter and Facebook, but they're going a little underused. I'd like to fix that. And also, I'd like to meet with all society heads to figure out how to repair those relationships as part of that. And lastly, this is something that I've been proposing to students while I campaign, but with administrators' help, I'd love to implement a Brightspace feature for the DSU. Every student uses Brightspace. It's an easy way to get information across, and every student checks Brightspace. So that would be something I'd like to have as part of the DSU.
Thank you. All right, we will move on to the next question. And we'll start with Veer. So Veer, how will you deal with those who oppose DSU policies or statements while you are holding your position as a VP internal?
I would take criticism or anyone that opposes my view as VPI as a really, really positive thing, because first of all, it means that students are actually engaged with the DSU. And then the second point is that when someone criticizes me, it's likely that they have a better idea. And as VPI, I feel that it would be my responsibility to find the best way to serve people, or the best and most effective way that people would be able to be served. I think it's a really good thing to have feedback from me, so I know what I can do to improve, and it's also a good way to understand what students really expect from me. So I'd respond by talking it out with them and getting more specific and discussing different strategies on how to implement that.
Thank you. Mitch, same question.
I think that opposition is the first important step to really being able to engage with students and finding out what they want to see and why they're opposed. It is a great conversation starter and a way to hear their opinions and their different approaches to how to handle a situation. I will take this opposition as an opportunity to look at the situation through a new lens, one that I may not have been privy to in the past. I will use my office hours and open forums to get to know students on a more personal basis and really address the issues that they want to see and want to see handled within the union.
Thank you. Ali, same question.
When it comes to opposition, I really think that we need to approach it with open ears. I'm always open to opposition to my personal opinions. I understand that this is a body that represents students, and I'm only one student in this entire union. So coming into a position that holds this power, I really would encourage opposition so that we can find middle ground to make things work. However, that being said, that does not mean that there is space for anti-indigeneity, anti-blackness, Islamophobia, transphobia, any sort of ism. So in the event that it goes beyond the scope of, a clear dialogue between people where we respect one another, I think that there needs to be a firm stance taken so that we stand in solidarity with our students.
Thank you. Samuel, same question.
So I definitely agree in the sense with other people that when students have criticisms for me, I truly believe that they would be genuine. If whatever I'm doing is upsetting students, I want to know why. Part of that is addressing any complaints, seeing the nature of the complaints, and making sure that those students, if they, even if I'm not able to help them, that they know that they are being heard and that their criticisms are not being ignored. So, thank you.
Thank you. And Annie, same question.
Yeah. So we face this every single day. Each student is unique, so opposition's meant to happen, and I encourage it. I want to have that conversation, and I want to step aside so students can do what they need to do for them. I want to be there to engage with students and to be interested in the best interests of the students. So I can put my pride aside so that we get done what we need to get done. Because this position isn't about me. It's about the student union. It's about representing the body of students that are here and that want to have their voices heard. So I'm not here to hold a position of power. I'm here to stand in solidarity. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on to the next question. And Mitch, you'll be the one to answer this question first. What is the biggest impact you want to make while holding the position of VP Internal?
In terms of biggest impact, I really want to streamline the ratification process and make the resources that the DSU has to offer more open and accessible to students and student societies. I think that there are a lot of untapped resources that the DSU has, whether it be the snow cone machine, graphic designer, room bookings, media outlets, to let students know about open society events. I want societies to feel like they are supported and have greater access to the resources that they pay for on campus. Through this, I hope to drive more engagement within the students. I want to help change that public opinion of what the DSU is so that students feel that they want to get involved and want to be part of that student union. Try to make the DSU something that students are proud to be engaged with and proud to have at their school.
Thank you. Ali, same question.
The biggest impact that I'd like to make if elected to the VPI position is creating a Society 101 manual where student societies could have all the resources in one spot. This was created before, however, I would like to go beyond that and establishing something that starts at the beginning of the process of student societies all the way up to running a referendum. I really want to utilize student societies on campus so that each student society has the voice or the platform to be seen within the union. In addition to that, something else I'd like to create is a bursary through the Office of Equity and Accessibility. So this would be a bursary up to $500, which would be accessible to students who are faced in situations that, where they need the extra help.
Thank you. Samuel, same question.
So the biggest impact that I'd like to make if I elected VPI would actually be a philosophical one, and it's one that I'd like to make the office an apolitical one. It's really important that the DSU supports student activism and student goals because that's part of what makes our campus great. But as soon as that official takes a side on that issue, you're leaving students feeling alienated. If I want to be a good VPI, one that can interact with every single student society and make sure that every student feels comfortable and safe, alienating them politically is not the way to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Annie, same question.
Of course. I want to make Dalhousie that we are proud of. I want to be a part of the movement where we utilize the resources that we have here on campus and that we share those resources. I certainly know resources in my 4th year that I didn't know about in my 1st year, and having that knowledge, I want students to be able to translate that downwards and upwards, so when people discover resources, it's shared amongst the student body. I want to feel that feeling of connectedness to our campus. I want to feel proud to say I am a Dalhousie Tiger and to say that I go to Dal. I want to work with societies to do workshops and networking events, as well as building our CVs and co-curricular records. I want to work on resources that we can use when we're beyond the DSU. I want us to work together, and I want to serve as an open door so that students feel comfortable addressing the executives, as well as having the opportunity to share their great ideas. Thank you.
Thank you. And Veer, same question.
Could you repeat it, please?
Of course. What is the biggest impact you want to make while holding the position of VP Internal?
I think the biggest impact that I'd like to make would be that when I walk across like the Dalhousie campus and pick a random student from anywhere, from any faculty, from any year, and ask them what the DSU is, what it stands for, and what its purpose is, and if they're able to answer that to me successfully and give and really tell me what the DSU is all about, then I think that would probably be my biggest accomplishment. I'd also like to have a more approachable and available approach towards societies, that societies would be able to contact the DSU if they want, when they need help, or societies should just find the DSU approachable, because that's just our job.
Thank you. All right, candidates, we'll move on to the next question. Ali, you'll be the first one to answer this. If you can name one thing currently being done in this position, VP Internal, that is positive, what would it be?
One of the things that I think Alex did really well this year was when she set up for the society fair. So I was involved in the society fair through the Indigenous Student Center, and it was I was always easily able to access Alex if I had any questions, as well as the DSU member services. However, I think that we could go beyond this by reintroducing a society fair at Sexton so that Sexton students can get involved. By introducing a society fair on Carleton campus, in agriculture campus, we can go beyond the scope of what we're currently doing. However, this is something that I've seen as a very positive thing that has been done.
Thank you. Samuel, same question.
So, as a DSU outsider, this can be a little bit of a tricky question because I don't always know, as a student, what each executive is doing. But I also did like the society fair. There's been a lot of cultural fairs on campus. I'm a strong believer that diversity is something that makes Dal extremely great. And I'd like to see more of those on campus as well.
Thank you. Annie, same question.
Yeah, so I think Alex did a great job of being approachable. She was super friendly to interact with and always had a positive experience with her on campus. Another thing that she did really well was she started to further develop the DSU website. I think that this could also be taken further, but I believe that she did a great job of establishing it and working on it from what it had been since my first year. I think, as well as the other candidates had articulated, that the society fair was a great opportunity for many. I was able to be both a participant as well as have a booth for a portion of the day, and it was a great experience overall and an opportunity where many students actually came out to. So I think it was a really great opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Veer, same question.
So one thing that I really liked about our current VPI was on the website you could see their office hours and how available and their availability, and they had their email and phone numbers and things like that. So I think that's a really good way for people to communicate with her according to their preference. I still think it could be improved in the sense that it could be broadcast to more students in some of the different ways that I've talked about. But I really like the idea of having open office hours for anyone to just come in and talk to you.
Thank you. And Mitch, same question.
This year, Alex has worked to set up a more defined and structured process for the Student Accessibility Fund and the Grants Committee. I think that this is a great step to move forward to have a better format on how this money is allocated to students. The Grants Committee helps to support students in many roles and walks of life. Having a more defined and structured process makes the allocation and distribution of this money more transparent to the students that it's going to.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on to the next question. Samuel will be the first one to answer this one. If you can name one thing currently being done that's in this position that may need improvement, what would it be?
So I've touched on this a bit, but the clear, resounding message I've been getting from student societies is that there's a lot that could be done. Societies in general, from what I've spoken to, feel a little alienated and intimidated by the DSU, definitely on a political front, but also just on a communications front. Communications are not always clear. Sometimes people can get mixed up of who they need to talk to. And streamlining that process, making it obvious that exactly who people need to talk to and who societies can interact with is definitely one of the first steps that I'm going to be taking as VPI, if elected.
Thank you. Annie, same question.
Yeah, of course. So although there's been a lot of progress in the DSU this past year, I think there's definitely room for improvement in terms of inconsistency. I find that between social media posts, as well as being more present on campus and class talk. So I feel that although Alex did a great job of being present while she was there, there's some inconsistencies. And if elected, I would love to be available to students throughout the year, not just in times where I have more free time, but throughout the entire year. I'd also like to be more present on social media, interacting with students, and not leaving those questions unanswered. And I'd like to do class talks or society talks in which the VPI is actually present at those meetings. As Ali said, there's tons of societies, all 365 of them, and it would be really great to, if the VPI cannot be present there, having more interactions and more opportunities for society members to be involved. Thank you.
Thank you. Veer, same question.
So I think that one thing that the current position could really improve on is establishing a strong sense of the DSU's purpose and what it's really meant to do. So when I was campaigning around, I talked to a lot of people, and even during my nominations, and many people didn't even know about these executive positions or what the DSU is supposed to do. All they knew is that the DSU charges $78 every term for them. And I really think that we can really build on this and improve this by all the methods that I've really talked about earlier.
Thank you. Mitch, same question.
I think one of the things that could be expanded on and improved upon in the position is some of the major societies that we have on campus are still not ratified as official societies yet. One of those largest societies is the Howe Hall Residence Council. First-year students make up one of the largest cohorts of students on campus, and those that live in residence buildings. For these societies to not have been ratified and not have the resources to the DSU and to some of their money that they have for funding, I don't think is appropriate. It's something that we should have addressed a while ago and that should really be looked at. So having a VPI that is a little bit more visible and shows more support to those large societies and to those societies that really need it and that may have fallen through the cracks, I think would be a good way to move forward and really show students that we are engaged with them and that we care about their interests.
Thank you. And Ali, same question.
One area where I feel that the current VPI could have improved would have been in establishing more proactive relationships with societies and students. So rather than waiting for societies to reach out and ask for help, routinely checking in and asking societies if they need anything. So by doing this, you're creating a proactive relationship with societies so that they're more comfortable in approaching you and asking you for help when they need it.
Thank you. All right, so now we're going to move on to questions that have been submitted from the student body. We're going to have one question for right now, and then we're going to take a short break. So the first person to speak on this is Annie. So Annie. The ENA office has traditionally fallen under the mandate of VPI, How do you plan to hold the office and its yearly hires accountable to students of the union, and what projects and initiatives do you want to see implemented?
Sure. Can you repeat it one more time, please?
Of course. The E&A office has traditionally fallen under the mandate of the Vice President Internal. How do you plan to hold the office and its yearly hires accountable to students of the union, and what projects and initiatives do you want to see implemented?
Yeah, so I think it is important to really address students and feedback and what they want to see happen. I have no intention of making these decisions single-handedly, but addressing the student body as a whole to see what they feel is fit. In terms of, are you allowed to repeat the question once I start or no? Just the second half?
I can repeat a question.
Thanks.
Of course. The E&A office has traditionally fallen under the mandate of the Vice President Internal. How do you plan to hold the office and its yearly hires accountable to students of the union, and what projects and initiatives do you want to see implemented?
Yeah, and I'd just love to see an increase in student involvement. So paying our staff at the DSU the proper wages that they deserve, and not just on honorariums, but to really address and give students the opportunity to be a part of what Dal has to offer. Thank you.
Thank you. Veer, same question.
Could you please repeat it?
Of course. The E&A office has traditionally fallen under the mandate of the Vice President Internal. How do you plan to hold the office and its yearly hires accountable to students of the union, and what projects and initiatives do you want to see implemented?
So I think it kind of goes with like the overall engagement in the DSU, using multiple platforms and trying to like inform as many students as possible about all these things that are available for them. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Mitch, same question.
Do you want to repeat it one more time?
Of course. The E&A office has traditionally fallen under the mandate of Vice President Internal. How do you plan to hold the office and its yearly hires accountable to students of the union, and what projects and initiatives do you want to see implemented?
So first off, I think working with the Equity and Accessibility Office would definitely be a collaboration between the Vice President Internal, the rest of the union, and that office. I think using this office to help with follow-up on what they are doing, what they want to do, and where they want to go really can help us engage with students and engage with the people that hold these positions. I think the VPI has a really important role in supporting this office, and I'd love to see more student jobs coming out of this office. I think it'd also be great to use this office when it comes to members that sit on the grants committee and deciding where student allocation of funds is going for the year.
Thank you. Ali, same question.
Could you repeat it again?
Of course. The E&A office has traditionally fallen under the mandate of the Vice President Internal. How do you plan to hold the office and its yearly hires accountable to students of the union, and what projects and initiatives do you want to see implemented?
I think a good way of holding anyone accountable when managing an office is having someone that they can report to. So I think here it would be a really great opportunity for us to hire a full-time staff member. They could be a recent graduate. We can work on that with the respected bodies that would need to be included in this conversation. However, I really think that this would be a really great opportunity to create better equity on campus, whether that be equity for students who are marginalized or equity for students between campuses. So we could use this office to help establish better equity between the campuses through DSU resources, establishing resources on the various campuses, and using our students that we hire part-time in order to help fulfill this.
Thank you. And Samuel, same question.
So with anything related to equity and accessibility, one of the things that I really want to make sure happens is that when we're hiring people in terms of equity, when we're dealing with student accessibility, it's really important to consult with students who are actually part of the communities that these offices are supposed to represent and help. As someone who is a Native Canadian and also like not a member of a visible minority, it isn't possible for me to always see myself from the perspective of those students because I'm not a part of those communities and I don't share those shared experiences that they experience every day. So consulting with those students, making sure that people in charge of those offices are members of those communities will definitely make the office more accountable and probably much more well-functioning space. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so we're going to take a short break as it is the top of the hour. It is 6 o'clock. We have some flyers up here about encouraging students to vote. We have some flyers if you want to hand out. We're going to come back in a few minutes, and then we'll have some more questions. So thank you very much.
gonna say for 3 hours. Like.
All right, welcome back. Thank you, candidates, for joining me back on the stage. This next question that we're going to starts with Veer. So, Veer, you'll be the first one to answer this. Do you have a concrete action plan for tackling sexual assault and rape culture on campus? How will you work with the Survivor Support Center and the other executives to achieve these goals?
Could you repeat that?
Of course. Do you have a concrete action plan for tackling sexual assault and rape culture on campus? How will you work with the Survivor Support Center and the other executives to achieve these goals?
I think like there's many different ways that like this can be like dealt with. So first, I think would be like allocating some resources towards like initiatives or like things that would actually help people out. So if I had like a concrete plan, then it would be to like ensure that there's always some funding available for these people to access resources that they might need in order to move on.
Thank you. Mitch, same question.
Can you repeat the question?
Of course. Do you have a concrete action plan for tackling sexual assault and rape culture on campus? How will you work with the Survivor Support Center and other executives to achieve these goals?
So I think the approach really comes down to using the resources that we currently have in place. So that being the Survivor Support Center and the Survivor Support Hotline. I think making sure that allocation is given to these offices and to these resources year after year ensures that survivors of sexual assault have somewhere to go. I think working with the other executives through a really collaborative approach would help us come at this issue on campus through multiple angles with multiple diverse opinions. I'm currently a driver with Tiger Patrol, and I have lots of connections with Dow Security. So I think using Dow Security as a main resource on campus to help with this and help support our initiatives would be a great way to tackle the issues around survivor support.
Thank you. Ali, same question.
Could you please repeat it?
Of course. Do you have a concrete action plan for tackling sexual assault and rape culture on campus? How will you work with the Survivor Support Center and other executives to achieve these goals?
I'm just writing it down. I'm so sorry. So one of the ways that I want to help tackle sexual assault and rape culture on campus is by making anti-O survivor support training, as well as so making those mandatory for all DSU ratified societies. I think that by bringing this down to the society level and making it mandatory for everyone to participate within this training, it'll really help open the conversation. This is something that's very important to me, and I really want to work closely with Shannon and the other DSU execs to help maintain this, this project.
Thank you. Samuel, same question.
So, in addition to working with the Sexual Assault Survivor Center, which is an extremely important resource for students on campus, as obviously sexual assault is one of the most important crimes someone could have happen to them. I'd also like to make sure that students who are living on campus specifically, where these are most likely to be taken, know where to go and who to talk to. I'd love for there to be more interactions where RAs can explain to their students living in their residences these kinds of things, both at the beginning and then continuously updating to make sure that students aren't forgetting or are continuously made aware that these resources are available and that those resources are adequately funded.
Thank you. And Annie, same question.
Do you mind repeating it? Sorry.
Of course. Do you have a concrete action plan for tackling sexual assault and rape culture on campus? How will you work with the Survivor Support Center and other executives to achieve these goals?
Well, I think most importantly, above all else, is that we believe survivors. So I believe that as executives, we have an obligation to stand with those who have these heartbreaking circumstances. Furthermore, I think that it's important that we reintroduce that phone hotline, let it known to students that we have that support system in place for them and that we will be that support for them. In terms of working with the other executives, I think it's really important to work really closely with the VPSL on this issue. They're the student life point of contact, working with them to make it known during O Week that this is a real live issue on our campuses and to protect people moving forward. I think that training societies and society executives is above all most important. If you address all those groups of bodies and educate all those groups of bodies on these life issues that students face, then students will feel more supportive. Once again, I'd just like to be a safe space for the students as well, maintaining my door open. Thank you.
Thank you. So candidates, this is a question that we'll have discussion. Candidates will get 45 seconds of uninterrupted speaking. At that point, I will cut you off. Any other candidate then can continue. If two try to speak at once, one will speak, the next will speak right after. Any candidate can begin right now.
I really liked what some of the other executives introduced about working with Dal Security. I think that it's important to recognize that not all people can feel most safe just because Dal Security is in place, but if Dal Security has a greater presence on campus, it might provide students with the opportunity that it's not just their executives that they can reach out to, that they can reach out to Dalhousie Security without feeling threatened by security and without the issue that they will get in trouble. So I think that making that relationship more genuine between Dal Security and students is really important.
You want to go?
Yeah. So I kindly disagree with that. I don't think that we need to be implementing more Dal Security on this issue. I think that this should be a student-led initiative so that we're talking to each other and having these conversations among ourselves. Unfortunately, not everyone feels comfortable and safe around figures of authority such as Dal Security, police, etc. And I really think that we need to recognize the intersections of those relationships and understand that that's not a safe space for everyone. I think the best way in fostering safe spaces is just working with each other and providing as much education as possible.
I definitely agree with Ali on the not everyone feeling safe with security. I know for a fact that many people at Dal come from communities that are regularly targeted by security officers and police, and that can cause problems. Additionally, making sure that students can work with friendly faces when faced with traumatic situations like sexual assault is extremely important because it can be extremely hard to talk to strangers when facing those kinds of issues.
Yeah, and I do feel that what those two candidates said is completely valid in that we do want students to communicate with other students, but I do think that not necessarily having Dal Security educate more people on the issue, but just having them as a more closely linked to the student body is really important in the sense of having more than one option to turn to in terms of safe spaces. I do believe that students should have the right to have access to numerous resources, and I just want to make that relationship a little bit more genuine.
I agree that it definitely should be something that's led by students and definitely something that's student run. But I'm with Annie on the fact that I don't see any harm in having Dal Security be on the same page as us. Having Dal Security knowing that if something happens on campus, that they know the resources that the DSU has, that they know where they can refer someone to, and the hotlines that they can use to help survivors get through what they're going through when these kind of situations do arise. So not having Dal Security as that main point of contact, but definitely having them as a partner on our side to help support those students.
And just to echo what they both said, it's just that it's important to have as many resources, as many options available for all these students who face these experiences. Everyone has different preferences on how they want to deal with it, and by providing resources and fundings for these different methods is really critical and important.
All right, if there's no one else that wants to speak on that, we will move on to the next question. So Mitch, you'll be the one to answer this one first. How would you address a sexual assault disclosure if a student or coworker approaches you during your term?
So I think I'd definitely draw on my past experience as a RA in residence life. I think they definitely give us lots of good training on how to approach this. So I think first off, you believe the person that's coming to you with the claim. You really want to be there to support the survivor, and you want to move through that disclosure on their own terms. So whether that be contacting further resources, whether that be contacting the police, the authorities, Dow Security, whatever resources we want there, I think it's really important to recognize where the survivor is coming from and move through that on their terms. It shouldn't be something that they're pressured into further pursuing anything, but really just being there to be that support, to be that opening ear, and really listening to what they have to say.
Thank you. Ali, same question.
Could you please?
Of course. How would you address a sexual assault disclosure if a student or coworker approaches you during the term?
If a student or coworker were to approach me with claims of being sexually abused, I would, first off, I would believe. Second, I would ask what they wanted. I think it's really important that before you take action, to take that action from them. So figuring out whether or not it is something that they want to pursue. However, making it known that this is a closed space and that I am there to support them in any way that they believe that they may need to be supported. And then once the relationship is established and then that is clear, helping them find any resources that they may need. It's really about just being there, being a support, and finding those resources, however, doing it on the survivor's terms.
Thank you. Samuel, same question.
So definitely the best first thing to do in those kinds of situations is always believe the victim. You know, that is just a necessary thing if you want people to approach you about these kinds of things. And also, I definitely agree with letting the victims choose what they'd like. I'd never want to make a decision for any sort of victim because every single person's situation is different, and every single person's situation deserves to be treated on its own accord. And the last step to that would be to assist that person, if they so choose, to whatever authorities they'd like to be referred to, and assist in any way in comforting and helping them find those resources. Thank you.
Thank you. Annie, same question.
Yeah, so as my fellow executives also mentioned, is believing the survivor first. This is an awful issue that still exists on campus, and it's very real. The second thing that I would do is offer support and on their terms. So be there for them to listen, and then ask them what supports they feel they have. And if they feel like they don't have supports, ask them what supports they need and what they want. I would also offer resources that we do have on campus, but then ones that are beyond campus. So ones that exist in our community. We are located in Central Halifax, and there's so many other opportunities, even outside of campus, where maybe they won't feel like they're recognized or known, which may be a better option for them. On a personal note, I would really extend myself above and beyond the office duties. So just letting that person know that I am there for them and that I cannot express how unfortunate that circumstance is, but just to be there as a moral support through their hard time.
Thank you. And Veer, same question.
I think like what I would say has already been echoed by my fellow colleagues. So I would like take it into a two-step process. The first step would be to believe and support. So like talk to them or listen to them or ask them like all these questions about how they feel or what they whatever they really want to do based and depending on the situation. And then the second step would be to understand their needs and how they want to move forward with it, and using that information and talking to them based on their preference, as Annie said, about off-campus resources, on-campus resources, and try to really take them to like the best resource possible for them to like go from here.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on to the next question. Before I do, I just want to remind everyone that's in the audience that if they have any questions that they'd like to submit up here, they can go see Caitlin. She will be taking questions via Google Doc, and they will try to answer them if we can get to them. So this next question will be for Ali. She is first. So Ali, in the recent event of anti-black graffiti on campus, what specific initiatives will you implement to make marginalized communities on campus feel safe and welcomed into the various organizations on campus?
Could you just repeat the second half?
Yep.
Or the full thing, if that's easier.
What specific initiatives will you implement to make marginalized communities on campus feel safe and welcome into the various organizations on campus?
One of the things that I really want to introduce to the union that I think would make the lives of marginalized students a lot easier, just speaking from example, is taking on and assuming the responsibility of teaching non-racialized folks about the realities that we live. So working with Indigenous, racialized people, like Black, Indigenous, and people of color in order to create these resources and teach students about them. As a community leader, I often feel that I am taking up a lot of my own personal time to help educate others. And although this is important, I also think it's important that I'm a student first. I can only be a student as much as I can when I'm trying to constantly educate other people. And I think that this is something important for the for the DSU to take on in order to help, help make it a safer space for students.
Thank you. Samuel, same question.
So with incidents like these that happen on campus that are one of the most unfortunate things we have to deal with, I think an important first step for any of these situations is to consult the communities affected first to find out how they feel about the attack, because it isn't possible for me to live through their experiences. It isn't possible for me to always know, and I would never want to make a decision for a community that they didn't actually support. So meeting with them, making sure that they know that the union is taking action for them and protecting them, and that these attacks aren't a reflection of the student union, but rather as an attack from someone who their values are not represented here. Thank you.
Thank you. Annie, same question.
Yeah, so similarly to what Ali said as well, I believe that it's important to teach and it's important to educate. And as executives, we have a voice, and it's important to use that voice to stand up against those hurtful and awful occurrences that happen on campus, and to show the student body that those aren't tolerated, and they aren't tolerated by the DSU. And I think it's important to have a safe consulting space, so a place where these people affected by these awful incidences have a safe space to disclose how they are feeling and to talk about ways that are best to go about it. I'd also like to sit with these individuals and offer support, and to once again believe that they are victims and that it should be addressed in that way. Thank you.
Thank you. Veer, same question.
Could you please repeat it?
Of course. In the recent event of anti-black graffiti on campus, what specific initiatives will you implement to make marginalized communities on campus feel safe and welcome into the various organizations on campus?
So I think like the first step would be to, as like a role model and as a representative of the student union, would be to send an apology or an acknowledgement of what's happened, and just apologize for what happened. The second step, I think, would be to educate people and emphasize the values that we as Dalhousie stand for as a community, and really take it one step forward and really try to emphasize these values. But I think that just talking about it would not really make the problem go away, and hence I also believe that it's also important to take some action, and that would increase that would mean increased surveillance. to ensure that such things do not happen again. And if they do, then they're caught earlier. And also, if someone's caught, then like taking strict action against those people who do it would set an example for our community and really emphasize the values that we stand for as a community.
Thank you. And Mitch, same question. Of course. In the recent event of anti-black graffiti on campus, what specific initiatives will you implement to make marginalized communities on campus feel safe and welcome into the various organizations on campus?
So first, I think it's important to recognize that I don't belong to any of these groups. So I think it's really not a decision that I can take or I can spearhead. So I think it really starts with collaboration and consultation from these groups. Getting out there and speaking to these groups about how they feel, how these acts make them feel, and what kind of supports they want on campus, or what kind of supports they want to see from the DSU, I think is the first step to really understand where they are coming from. I think really being able to use positions within the DSU to show marginalized students that there are resources and there are positions and ways for them to get involved, using our commissionaire positions, our staff members' positions. After incidences like this, creating panels, creating committees, and creating discussions within the Dalhousie community to really see where these students are coming from and figure out what kind of things they need to see out of the DSU.
Thank you. All right, so candidates, you'll have a 5-minute discussion on this question. Candidates will get 45 seconds of uninterrupted speaking. If two candidates attempt to speak after that 45 seconds of another candidate, one will speak, the other will follow. You may begin when ready.
Yes, I think it's really important. I had the opportunity to go to an anti-oppressive training last night, and one of the things that they touched on was something that I believe Ali touched on earlier, and was the idea that often when we're faced with instances like these, it's these groups that are feeling these things that are in charge of educating. And I think as important as executives to consult these groups and then to help them educate so that they're not the ones that are left in charge of educating on these issues, because they're trying to cope and they need that space to do so. So as executives, I think we have an obligation to learn these things and to consult with these groups and to work towards educating the general student body so that these populations aren't left to do it themselves.
If nobody has anything to say.
One of the ways that I think that we could approach this is by introducing or by advertising anti-O training to societies through a society plan and creating, I guess, one of the ideas I have is to create it's a society forum where societies would be rated based on their activities within the union. So whether that be through sustainability initiatives, whether that be through making equity movements, et cetera, we could include anti-O training as a mandatory thing for them. And this would encourage other societies to go about...
and that's 45.
I'm allowed to respond? Okay, to respond to Ali's comment, well, I think it is extremely important to educate, everyone about how oppression happens and how we can avoid situations like that. I definitely think that rating societies would be a very divisive thing. If societies are rated in any way comparable to each other as being part of the union, I really think that's an easy way to ostracize many students and push them away from the union rather than bring them in and try to educate them.
So I guess the idea of rating societies is more along the lines of creating friendly competition so that students would want to engage in this process. Usually when you create mandatory training sessions for societies, there's a lot of backlash. So by creating a friendly competition among societies, people will be eager to participate in these actions.
I maintain my stance that I've already spoken to societies. I know that some of their interactions politically with the DSU has been negative. And pushing them more to the fringes, I think, would just create a more alienated and divided campus. And division always leads to outbursts of hatred and bigotry. and I definitely would try to, as much as possible, move away from those kinds of things rather than create situations that breed that.
I really enjoy Allie's idea around the idea of making anti-oppression training a mandatory thing for societies. And I think that the intent behind the idea of the forum is quite good in the sense that it is creating friendly competition. For me personally, I don't know if I would do it in regards to that specific training, but I think that the idea of having a forum where societies can interact with one another and almost share with each other different opportunities that they have, like, hey, I'm doing this training, why don't you do it? Or, hey, I learned this at this training, has your society done it? I think that is actually a really healthy way to get societies to do new things. Thank you.
All right, if no one else wants to speak on that, we'll move on to the next question. So we have Spencer, you are the one to speak first. So what relevant experience do you have to this position? Example, working with societies, budgets, and committees.
Sorry, can you repeat the question, please?
Of course. What relevant experience do you have to this position? Examples, working with societies, budgets, and committees.
Ever since I was a kid, I've always been involved with scouting movements. I've helped run a scout troop for 5 to 7-year-olds, but it did involve quite a bit of balancing budgets, organizing activities, and dealing with people who are not always happy. So that's obviously something you have to deal with. Furthermore, I'm used to working 70-hour weeks. I've done that as a cook for entire summers at a time in hot conditions with upset people. So being able to keep a level head and organize those people, in these kinds of stressful situations is a huge qualification that I think would bring a lot to the DSU.
Thank you. Annie, same question.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Of course. What relevant experience do you have to this position? Example, working with societies, budgets, and committees.
Of course. So I actually hold the VPI position on 2 committees that I sit on right now. And then furthermore to that, I've had experience on many different positions on different committees. So right now I chair the Rec Orientation Committee, in which I work with our other group members to cohesively create the orientation camp in which all recreation students must take part in when they enter Dalhousie. I also work in the past have worked with Dal After Dark and sat on their grant committee in which we allocated funds to student initiatives in which we determined how much each student got and which causes they had. Each cause had to have educational components to it, which was another awesome thing to be a part of. In addition to that, I currently work with DSEP, which is Dalhousie Student Engagement Programming, and I sit as the supervisor in that role, so I work with engaging students both on and off campus and engaging the rest of my staff. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Veer, same question.
So I think like the core idea of being a VPI comes down to communication and whether you're able to listen to people or whether you're able to get your message across to other people. It's the understanding of meaning. So in my experience, as I've mentioned earlier, I've debated for about a decade. I've been involved in like Model UN activities. I've been involved in different sorts of debates and all that. So I think that's really helpful when it comes to communicating to people. And then there's also like the idea of like talking to different committees and like trying to solve problems and things like that. So as a person, I personally believe that because of all my experiences, vast experiences, I always bring a different solution or different ways to get past the problem and always something like new or different to the table. So I think that's something that might be helpful.
Thank you. Mitch, same question.
So I think some of the relevant experiences that I bring to the position of VPI would definitely be the management and supervisory roles, working with students in summer jobs and working with students on campus throughout the year. Some of these include, in my first year, I was the vice president of my residence council in Howe Hall. I think that gave me a lot of good experience as to what the first year experience is like and really dealing with and managing students and many different points of views. In my second year, I worked as an RA in the residence life system. This role gave me multiple experiences in dealing with conduct, in dealing with students, and in dealing with many different perspectives and different ways of looking at a situation or looking at a problem. I have been the president of student groups on campus before, once again just echoing that leadership role and that role of dealing with students and student societies. I think when it comes down to it, there's multiple ways to approach a problem and approach a situation. And the communication that comes out of that and the way in which all parties' opinions are viewed and allowed to be expressed really helps that.
And Ali, same question.
So drawing off of my experience both on and off campus, I was able to narrow it down to 2 positions that I've held, one on and one off, that are specifically relevant to the VPI position. For example, last year I was the Chief Returning Officer of the Dalhousie Student Union elections. Although there was a lot of issues with the elections last year, I definitely sympathize with this year's elections committee because I was hired on 1 month. My committee was formed 1 month before the elections were to roll out, and we were able to successfully complete that. So during my time as the CRO, I overseen a budget of $10,000. I overseen the DSU Elections Committee, which I chaired. I also was in charge of interpreting and enacting policy. In addition to my experience on campus, I also worked as the Mesquite Gugjusan Wind Farm project assistant, where I sat on various hiring committees where I was mandated to hire as many Mi'kmaq eligible workers as possible.
Thank you. All right, so we're going to move on to the next question, and Annie, you'll be the one to address this one first. So Annie, what committees and societies would you like to sit on as Vice President Internal, and why?
Sure, can you repeat that one more time?
Of course. What committees and societies would you like to sit on as Vice President Internal, and why?
I don't want this to sound like a generic answer, but as many as possible. I think that after student outreach this year, I've learned that there are so many societies that I had never known even existed before my 4th year, and I would love to be a part of as many of those as I can. Some of the societies I would love to sit on would be the Accessibility Society, as well as other committees in terms of the Loaded Ladle and some other events that are going around campus. I love being a part of societies and committees that speak to the student issues that are existing on campus, as that's something I'm really passionate about. The other thing I love being a part of, which I think comes mostly out of my recreational degree, is just being involved in societies and committees that are across the board. So not being funneled into one specific interest or idea, but just being as well-versed as I can be across campus. Thank you.
Thank you. Veer, same question.
Same as Annie mentioned, as many as possible. Now, I know there's too many different societies, but there's a really broad range. And I think as VPI, it would be my responsibility to communicate and engage with them as many times as possible throughout the year. So I would pick from board game societies to the more resourceful societies to faculty societies, and there's this whole broad range. And for me, all societies would be equal, and I'd try to get involved with all of them as much as I could.
Thank you. Mitch, same question.
I think in the role of VPI, it creates a very unique opportunity to support all societies and be a part of and involved in all societies at some base level. For me, this is something I'm very passionate about. I love new opportunities and new experiences and getting involved with something that I may not have been involved with in the past. So I see this experience as something that would be a good way to learn more about students on campus, learn more about their interests, and learn more about how I can support them. Two major ones that I definitely would be excited for are sitting on the Grants Committee and the Student Accessibility Fund. I think this provides a very unique opportunity to help fund students on campus that may be lacking in financial areas or need some more support for things that they would like to do but wouldn't have that financial accessibility in other areas from their life.
Thank you. Ali, same question.
Could you please repeat it?
Of course. What committees and societies would you like to sit on as Vice President Internal, and why?
If elected as the next Vice President Internal, I would really like to sit on the Bylaw and Policy Review Committee. I think it's extremely important that we create more space for marginalized voices through policy, and that's something that I want to bring to the table. Societies that I would like to get involved with if elected, or regardless on if I'm elected, is I really want to get involved with Divest DAL. I've had the opportunity to meet a lot of really great folks throughout this period, and I'm really excited about the work that they're doing.
Thank you. And Samuel, same question.
So I'd also really like to sit on the policy board, as I definitely have some recommendations and ideas for them. But I also think that having a wide variety of societies to sit on, as well as making sure that I'm focusing on societies who do feel like they've been neglected, is a huge part in repairing the relationships between the DSU and those societies. So that would definitely be my focus on which societies to sit on. But again, echoing other candidates, sitting on as many as possible is obviously the best and most effective decision.
Thank you. All right, we will move on to the next question. This one will have a discussion after everybody has answered. Veer, you are first. How do you feel about having closed spaces for marginalized students?
Could you repeat that?
Of course. How do you feel about having closed spaces for marginalized students?
What do closed spaces mean?
In regards to the question, I believe closed spaces means spaces that are exclusive to those who are marginalized students in order to feel safe within on campus.
While I think it's a good idea to have closed spaces, sometimes people want to go back to their own communities or find people from their own communities. I still think it's important, as Dalhousie I think stands for that, to have as many open spaces as possible to encourage and promote connections between people, communication between diverse people, because Dalhousie is a really diverse and vibrant community, and I think it's also important to see both sides.
Thank you. Mitch, same question.
Can you please repeat the question?
Of course. How do you feel about having closed spaces for marginalized students?
I think that having closed spaces for marginalized students may lead to alienation and separation from the larger Dalhousie community. I think that we need to work to find spaces that are open to all students where we can work on integration and collaboration within these student groups. Finding a way to help students feel safe and feel able to connect with their fellow Dalhousie members and their fellow students and help educate each other about their own background, their heritage, their diversity, and really be able to celebrate that on campus. I think that creating closed spaces may further this and may offset this, and I really think that we should be able to embrace our differences and celebrate those with our other students within our communities.
Thank you. Ali, same question.
There's a discussion piece after this?
Yep.
I think that closed spaces are necessary, and I'm going to leave it at that until the discussion.
Okay. Samuel, same question.
So I am a large proponent of equity. I think that it's important to for each community to have spaces where they definitely are comfortable, and if they do not have those spaces, it's important to create them. However, I would like to echo what Mitch said. Historically speaking, closed spaces do not work well. They create divisive societies, and in a multicultural school with so much diversity, I don't see that as being an overall benefiting thing, though I do think the sentiment is in the right place.
Thank you. And Annie, same question.
So to echo what Ali said, the first word I wrote down when we were asked the question was necessary. These spaces are necessary for us to have on campus. As someone that has been a part of those spaces before, I believe that they are absolutely necessary, and there is no other reasoning as to why they shouldn't be there. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidates, you'll have 5 minutes to discuss this. A candidate can only speak 45 seconds uninterrupted before I'll cut you off. The candidate tries two candidates try to speak at the same time. One will go and then the other. Be respectful to one another. Anybody can start.
I think that closed spaces are extremely necessary, and they're important because we have to meet students where they're at. Unfortunately, we live in a world where there are racist, marginalized folks are not safe, and we need these spaces not because we want to marginalize ourselves, but because the open public does not include us. So I do think that these are necessary, and I think that they should be promoted because we need them.
So just to speak on that, I really do think that it is important for any marginalized communities to have spaces that they do feel safe in. However, closing the door to other students, creating segregated spaces like that, they definitely make the community as a whole feel incredibly uncomfortable. We have student societies for marginalized students, and those are great tools for students to be in comfortable spaces where they know they have the support of others, because I do agree that racism does exist. But creating segregated spaces definitely leaves a bad taste in most people's mouths and isn't what I want to represent.
Just to respond to that, I'm okay with the rest of the Dalhousie population feeling uncomfortable from these spaces. I just think that these spaces are a place where people can go to where they feel like they can relate to the other people in the room, that the people in the room aren't judging them, and that is a place where they can go when no matter what is happening in their life. So I think that they are absolutely necessary. Thank you.
And just to add to that, there's also we've kind of talked about some really severe and intense issues today, and we do not always have control over whether they happen or not, but I think it's important to provide spaces for people to be able to deal with such issues better.
I think when talking about safety and relatability, that those spaces can be used for that reason. I agree with my colleagues sitting up here that, and like I said earlier, I'm not part of one of these marginalized communities. I don't know where they're coming from. And I think that really presents an opportunity for collaboration and for open discussion. And if these spaces help students feel comfortable and feel safe and relatable on campus, then definitely. Those are spaces that should be allowed and that should be supported by the DSU. I also think that this presents a unique opportunity to find ways in which we can connect with those student groups, connect with these populations that feel the need for these safe spaces so that we can really try to bridge that gap and support each other on campus.
All right, if we're all done with discussion, we will move on to the next question. And this will be the last question before the break. So I believe that it is, whose turn is it right now?
It's Mitch's turn.
Mitch's? Okay, awesome. So Mitch, how will you work with marginalized communities to ensure that they feel safe, supported, and welcome in the various societies and within the DSU as a whole?
So I think we've touched on this a little bit, and I've definitely touched on it before. Coming from, or not coming from one of these marginalized groups, I don't really have that experience in my life. So I think it really comes to going to where they're at, to really listening to them, listening to the things that they want to see, listening to the things that their lived experiences on campus, and really finding a way to support them. And finding a way to support their needs, their wants, and their efforts so that those can be flourished on campus, so that those can be supported, and those ideas can be celebrated within the larger Dalhousie community.
Thank you. Ali, same question.
Could you please repeat the question?
Of course. How will you work with marginalized communities to ensure that they feel safe, supported, and welcomed in the various societies and within the DSU as a whole?
So one of the ways that I want to work with marginalized communities is going out and consulting with them. By doing this, I want to be able to create informed policy decisions in order to carve out space within the DSU bylaws for them to thrive. This is something that Council has done this year through something that Amina had passed by mandating the VPAE to take on the Racial Justice Symposium as part of their portfolio. I think that this is extremely important and that we need to make more steps like this.
Thank you. Samuel, same question.
So I definitely think that the best course of action with working with, marginalized groups is interacting with them themselves, making sure that they have input at every step of the way when I'm making decisions like that. But I also would love to see and create more opportunities for students to express their culture on campus. I think hosting events like cultural societies or even just cultural events in the quad or on other campuses is a way for students to engage and experience those cultures while being made by the actual people who are a part of them.
Thank you. Annie, same question.
Sure, can you repeat it?
Of course. How do you work with marginalized communities to ensure they feel safe, supported, and welcomed in the various societies and within the DSU as a whole?
Yeah, I think speaking to what Ali said about consultations, like the first point of contact is consulting these groups, but then also working collaboratively with these groups, using partnerships and showing up for these groups, not just showing up when we want something from them, but showing up every day and showing up and being present there with them. I think it's also about making space for these groups and for providing the support that they feel they need. I think it's also about working collaboratively with the VPAE and to make sure that the motions that they put forward are aligned with the groups that we are consulting. So thank you.
Thank you. And Veer, same question.
Just to kind of build on what everyone said, it's like I personally come from like a bunch of different cultures. I was raised in East Africa, Tanzania, and my parents came down from an Indian culture, and then like I've also lived in Canada for a few years. So like having all this knowledge, I think like the first key step would be to like really embrace them as one of our own. And then like, as others said, talk to them about like different events they like or things that they celebrate themselves at home or things that their culture celebrate. And then to show up for these and like to fund these and to support these. And I think that's how I'd really support diversity.
Thank you. All right, folks, so we're at the top of the second hour. It is almost 7 o'clock, so we're going to take our second break. If you have any questions, please submit them to Kat or Caitlin. They are there sitting at the table. They have their hands raised. Also, if we do happen to run out of questions before our time is done, then those in the audience are welcome to speak with the candidates one-on-one, as they will be here until 8 o'clock. And we hope that everybody is having a positive time here tonight. So we will be back in a short break. Thank you.
I've had positions on committees that I've had to like. I've never actually done anything.
Are you friends?
All right, welcome back for the last hour of debate. So we have a couple more questions. However, if we happen to run out of questions, the candidates will be here to engage with the audience on their own time. They can intermingle with the audience and they can talk with them. Also, we have our wonderful question takers, Kat and Caitlin, here for those who are here to submit questions. That way that the candidates can be responding to them. Otherwise, the remainder of the time between 7 and 8 will be used for the candidates to intermingle with those in the audience. So, I believe it is Samuel's turn for the first one.
Allie's, because Mitch went last.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Allie, so with previous allegations and poor reputations of some student societies and university-associated organizations due to certain events, how would you ensure that these reputations don't transfer to Dalhousie as a whole?
Could I get clarification on that? Like, it's just very vague, and I don't really understand the question.
Of course. So with previous allegations of poor reputations of some student societies and university organizations from certain events, how do you ensure that these reputations do not transfer to the rest of Dalhousie as a whole? In other words, how would you make sure that the bad apples do not affect the rest of Dalhousie?
Could I answer last?
What's that?
Could I answer last?
Well, there will be a discussion on it, so
I'll pass for now.
you'll pass for now? Okay. Samuel, same question.
Due to the question's vagueness, I don't know if I can like properly answer this, but I'm going to try my best. When students or societies behave poorly at Dal, it's important for the union to address those events, especially when they make news. I think that, obviously context matters quite a bit. So it's hard to say how I'd specifically address whatever issue comes up. But I think if people are hurt by the actions of Dalhousie students, then, an address definitely needs to happen. And, it depends on what the event was, what that address would entail, and what action would be taken afterwards.
Thank you. Annie, same question.
Sorry, can you reread it again?
Of course.
Sorry.
With previous allegations and poor reputations of some student societies and university associate organizations due to previous events, how would you ensure that these reputations don't transfer to the rest of Dalhousie as a whole?
I too agree that I don't want to misspeak based on a little bit of confusion on the question, but I think that in terms, if we're looking at it as bad apples affecting the rest, I think it's important to realize that those bad behaviors sometimes do reflect Dalhousie and that they need to be acknowledged in order to move forward. I think it's important that we have that conversation and that we use that as an opportunity to educate the rest of the student body on the issues that are happening on campus, and that we educate so that students don't gravitate towards negative actions towards other students. Thank you.
Thank you. Veer, same question.
So I think there's like different ways this could be approached. So first, it would be before an event actually occurs. That would be to like ensure that the most commonly known problems or things are managed by the society running it. And then like there's also like the idea of educating and echoing like all these values that we stand for as a community, and repeatedly like telling people who are running events and organizing stuff that and basically just telling them. So I think like we could base standards and things like that based on all these values that we stand for, and always definitely acknowledge unacceptable behavior and provide solutions to move forward based on what happened.
Thank you. Mitch, same question.
I think when it comes to societies of the union is ultimately responsible for the actions of the members that it has ratified. I think it's important to hold societies accountable when there is an issue that comes up. Not to sweep it under the rug, but to point it out and to talk about it. To have those conversations, have that dialogue, and talk about why it's unacceptable and why it shouldn't happen in the future. I think part of this can be led with some risk management or some pre-planning by the union for events, having a process where societies have to register their events and following that a little bit more closely so that the union can kind of mitigate the risks and the liability associated with societies hosting their events. And then really being able to look at and have those conversations when an event or something that a society doesn't go so well.
Thank you. So candidates, you'll have 5 minutes to discuss this. Candidates get 45 seconds of uninterrupted speaking. After that, if two candidates try to talk at the same time, one will talk and then the other will immediately follow. You may begin when you want to begin.
I guess for me, one of the things that I think about when I start thinking about this question is just why are we holding the reputation of Dalhousie University above our students? So really just looking at the process and saying, you know, whatever the incident would have been, standing with the students that it directly affected rather than the reputation of Dalhousie University.
I'd like to also echo that statement. You know, there's no such thing as a Dalhousie without students. So when students do actions, then that is a representation of the university, and you can't ignore that. And you know, also echoing what Mitch said, you know, I wouldn't ever want to sweep an incident under the rug. It's extremely important to address every single issue that comes up, and I'd want to work with students on how to fix that when problems happen.
Yeah, and I think just to echo what Ali said is we are students first, and we are here as a union to serve students. So why the heck are we worrying about what Dalhousie's reputation looks like? I think it's really important to look and address the issues that are here on campus and to stand with those whose actions hurt other, to stand with those who are hurt by other people's actions. Thank you.
To make Dalhousie better for the people.
All right, if we have no other discussion, then we'll move on to the next question. This is also the last question that we have. This will be Samuel to say first. So Samuel, how will you work with Levy societies to enrich the services and programming they provide?
So obviously, you know, Levy societies are those that are important. You know, if we fund them, it's probably for a reason. But you know, making sure that you know, levied societies have an opportunity to you know, hold referendums to increase those levies if it's necessary, and you know, communicating with them on an everyday basis, making sure that societies know who I am and are able to come to me if they need increases or any help.
Thank you. Annie, same question.
Sure, can you repeat it for me, please?
Of course.
Sorry, I do this to you every time.
How will you work with Levy societies to enrich the services and programming they provide?
Yeah, I think the first thing we can do is acknowledge how much work levied societies put into the DSU. I think that they do so much amazing work that provides opportunities for students to get involved. Moving forward, I'd love to hold town hall meetings in which the levied societies are invited to promote and let us know about what's going on with their levied societies, what events they're hosting, what events they want to see happen. And then as well as collaborating with the rest of the executive team to really work towards endorsing and promoting these levied societies to the student body, specifically like VPSL, like getting those bodies, like the levied societies, at their events so that students can get to know them on a better basis and get to know them earlier on in their degree.
Thank you. Veer, same question.
Can you repeat it?
Of course. How will you work with Levy societies to enrich the services and programming they provide?
So I think like this could be done in like multiple different ways. So first of all, it would be like being open and having open communication and also being available for societies when they need to like talk to you. Obviously, levied societies are important, and like it would also be important to ensure that they have enough resources to run and function properly. So I think like basically just being open and like ensuring that they have enough resources to run is really important.
Thank you. Mitch, same question.
I think we really need to provide much more support, awareness, and acknowledgement towards our levied societies on campus. These are societies that are going above and beyond to put work into supporting Dalhousie students and in supporting events that are for all Dalhousie students. I think that these levied societies have to have more of a say in what the DSU does and the direction that they would like to go with their events and with the DSU as a whole. Students see these levied societies as good enough to put extra money into and specific funding for these societies. So I think that it should really be, there should really be a way that we can support these societies so that we can use them to make student life stronger on campus.
Thank you. And Ali, same question.
If elected, just going back to what I had mentioned earlier, I really want to introduce society staff. So having bookable staff where societies could book to help them prepare events or any of the programs that they're putting on. However, there's also other ways that we can do this as individuals, regardless of whether or not we're candidates. So one is that we can individually volunteer. Many levy societies offer, invaluable resources to our union, and we really need to support them on an individual level. Another way that we can support societies, for example, is on March 12th and 13th, vote yes to Ennisburg and the CKDU levy questions. Support them by volunteering, showing up, supporting them through funding. It's extremely important, and yeah.
Thank you. All right. I am happy to say that we have received new questions. So this is not the last question. So now we are moving on to Annie, who will answer this first. So Annie, what is one plan you have for inter-society involvement, and how will you work with other exec members on this plan?
Yeah, so part of this is I really want to see involvement between societies, so not just with the the internal representative, but also with the society executives. So what I want to do is I want to work with societies on training towards grants and bursaries. So I want to train the executive team on how to do this so that they can translate that knowledge down to their members so that there is greater funding towards events and initiatives that students want to see happen on campus, and that they don't have to rely solely on the DSU to provide those funds, but that they can go to their societies and get support. So I really want to see those ideas turn into action. Thank you.
Thank you. Veer, same question.
Could you please repeat it?
Of course. What is one plan you have for inter-society involvement, and how will you work with other exec members on this plan?
I think by working with other exec members, we could all work together to get ideas and get plans and find ways to make societies self-sufficient, societies able to make positive contributions to the community and things like that. So I think it really comes down to the type of society that we're talking about, and the different ways and different methods that we can implement to make them more self-sustainable and more successful.
Thank you. Mitch, same question.
Can you repeat it, please?
Of course. What is one plan you have for inter-society involvement, and how will you work with other exec members on this plan?
So I think inter-society involvement on campus is very important. It gets different groups of people that might not get to know each other or might not work with each other to have those experiences and to bring each other's viewpoints to the table. I think maybe providing some extra funding or some promotion, some kind of incentive for societies to work together when it comes to events, when it comes to planning. In terms of other executive members, I think this provides a unique opportunity for the Vice President of Student Life and the Vice President Internal to really work together. At the end of the day, societies are ways that students get involved within student life on campus. And I think that using those two executive positions to really work together and collaborate can really help support students and create a better environment on campus.
Thank you. Ali, same question.
Could you please repeat the question?
Of course. What is one plan you have for intersocietal involvement, and how will you work with other exec members on this plan?
So I really resonate with Mitch's response to this. I really want to see more collaboration. However, just meeting societies where they're at and what kind of intersocietal involvement that they want. Really having a bottom-up approach to this is important, and consultation with these societies is key moving forward.
Thank you. And Samuel, same question.
So I think when addressing this question, one of the most important things to bring up is that like most students aren't really part of many societies or any at all. So having more visibility for societies and ways for societies to hold fairs and get other students who aren't involved in societies to participate is extremely important. I know when I went into my first year at Dal, societies were pretty intimidating. You know, you don't know anyone in it, and you're brand new on campus, and coming from a different province, I didn't really know anyone. So definitely holding more events like that is extremely important. And also, yeah, what Ali said, addressing societies and seeing how they do want to interact with other societies is very important, because I wouldn't want to force any interactions on any societies that they didn't want to.
Thank you. All right, so we'll move on to the next question. I believe Mitch is the first one to respond to this one.
It's Veer.
It's Veer. All right, my apologies. Veer, how will you hold societies accountable for their actions off campus?
Could you repeat that?
Of course. How will you hold societies accountable for their actions off campus?
I think like this can also be done in many different ways. So first of all, like it's just as I've mentioned throughout this debate, that we should emphasize and like really educate people on our culture and like the things expected of societies to like function outside or even on campus. So like just reiterating like the common behaviors and the things that we require from like societies. I think that would be really important. And to like hold them accountable would be to, if you see something that's not really done, then that's not really done properly, or something that's not been conducted properly, then you would have to like, I would probably introduce measures. So first it would be like warnings, and maybe eventually if there's repeated bad behavior, to like the overall like lack of permission, denial of permission to perform events.
Thank you. Mitch, same question.
I think you hold societies accountable off campus the same way you would hold societies accountable on campus. At the end of the day, they are societies under the DSU, and they are representing themselves and promoting themselves as that society and as DAL students. So I think the approach needs to be very similar, that societies need to be aware of when they're hosting events off campus as their societies, that does reflect upon them, upon the student union, and upon everybody else. So I really think it just comes down to holding them accountable in the same way and recognizing that they're DAL students, whether their society events are on or off campus.
Thank you. Ali, same question.
I very much agree with Mitch on this. It's actually exactly what I was going to say, so thank you.
Yeah,
All right.
I guess.
Yeah, Samuel, same question.
Okay, so yeah, when societies, you know, behave irresponsibly, whether it's on or off campus, they're still representing the school, and they're still representing the students, and I definitely think that the damage to their reputation is the same, so if there's going to be consequences, then it also needs to be the same. They're all DAL students. It doesn't matter whether it's on campus or not.
Thank you. Annie, same question.
Yeah, so to go with Ali and Mitch on that, you said it awesomely, and it's honestly like word for word what I wrote down. So I don't know how you managed to do that. But yeah, just to reiterate, it is a direct reflection of us as DSU members, not just us as maybe potential executives, but every student in that union. So to address issues off campus the same as we would on campus, I think is incredibly imperative. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll move on to the next question. And this one is for Mitch this time. So Mitch, how will you ensure society engagement with the campus and community?
Can you repeat that one more time?
Of course. How will you ensure society engagement with the campus and community?
So I think part of society engagement, like we've talked about all night, is showing up and really being present for those societies. Showing that you are there to support their actions, their initiatives, and the things they want to do. Part of engaging with them and supporting them, I think, really falls through using some of the channels that the DSU has. The DSU sends out Dow Student Life updates at least once a week. And I think that's a really good platform for us to use that to support student societies, events that are open to the rest of the Dow community. To really show that we're supporting the things that they're doing, the initiatives that they're trying to reach out to and support, so that all Dow students may be able to come out and get involved. I think by using these student life updates as a way to emphasize and highlight our student societies, that can also generate more involvement from students that aren't part of societies already. There's a large proportion of the community that isn't on a society or doesn't know what societies are out there. By using this platform to promote their events, I think it really would help students get more involved with the opportunities that are on campus.
Thank you. Ali, same question.
Could you please repeat the question?
Of course. How will you engage society engagement with the campus and community?
So one of the ways that I would like to do this, if elected for the VPI position, is by reintroducing the first-year rep on the DSU Council. I think that this is a really just important seat where we can share that information from council to different areas of the university that wouldn't normally be touched. The reason why I say this is because at the end of every meeting, we have an updates or a society updates where societies will tell you if they have events going on so that you can help promote it to your students. So another way that I would do this would be by bringing back the DSU dispatch. We had some this year. It wasn't as frequent as it was in previous years, and I'd really like to just bring that back and keep pushing that out. I understand that not everyone likes getting a bunch of emails, so also taking advantage of the street team and using them to promote these events by word of mouth.
Thank you. Samuel, same question.
So first of all, you know, if elected VPI, I want to meet one-on-one with all the societies and their elected or leaders or whatever. Yeah, also to engage with societies, I definitely think that, you know, especially in first year, especially in residence, those are the students who are just coming to campus and just figuring out what societies are. And making sure that societies have tools and resources to reach those students is extremely important. You know, I'd love to hold, you know, more fairs, more things like that. And especially, it's important to say that, like, not every society is equal. So, you know, they all have their own needs and desires. So working with them one-on-one just to figure out exactly what they think is the best solution would be the first step.
Thank you. Annie, same question.
Can you repeat it, please?
Of course. How will you ensure society engagement with the campus and community?
Yeah, so I think that starts, as well as the other candidates has said, through promoting and support. But I think with a perspective in student engagement, it's actually really important to understand what the students want and need. And I think it's also important to address that it's not only first-year students or undergraduates on this campus, but also to engage with the grad students and the community members. I think that's a really important part of our campus that often gets neglected to a certain degree. So I think that in order to promote engagement, it's really important to, what Ali said, utilize the street team. I'm so happy you said that, by the way, because I work with them, so that's awesome. The other thing as well is our RAs. RAs know so much about what the students want, and really utilizing the RAs' perspective and knowledge from what they hear from their students on their floors is super important in order to promote engagement. But in terms of working with other candidates, I would just say the VPSL in planning a week not only for undergraduates but for also grad students. Thank you.
And Veer, same question.
Yes, I think like how people communicate with the society, or like how societies are able to like attract people to like go there or basically engage with them, really comes down to like something I've mentioned earlier today, and that is communicating these back to the people. The people that are the Dalhousie students should know the types of societies that are available. They should know like all these different opportunities that are available for them. And I think this can be done through like various platforms. Once again, maybe we could introduce a web page, or maybe we could put around posters. But I think like we could use multiple platforms again to ensure that this message is sent effectively.
Thank you. So this next question, Ali is going to be responding first. It's the last question that we have. I also want to iterate that this is a very controversial question. There will be a discussion on this question, but I do feel that the candidates' voices should definitely be heard when it comes to this question. So, Ali, how would you have voted on the motion to not celebrate Canada Day if you were on exec at the time, and why?
I would give two perspectives. The first perspective is that as an Indigenous student, when I first heard about this motion, I was thrilled. I was thrilled that there was finally a union that represented my voice. However, I didn't understand all the repercussions that that brought. So one of the big things is that by not celebrating Canada Day at the DSU, that meant that students' societies didn't have access to funding to celebrate it for themselves. For myself, I personally do not celebrate Canada Day. But I don't judge people who do. I think that as citizens, you have the right to do what you please. However, that's not my choice. If I were a councillor at the time, I was elected into my position the next council meeting. I actually voted against this motion as it was originally written because of the voice of the Indigenous community that we have here. At the time, we voted.
That's time, but you will have time to speak for discussion. Samuel, same question.
I think, first of all, it's really important, before I give my answer, that colonialism is one of the most horrific things that has happened in our recent history. The effect that it's had on Canada's Indigenous population is immeasurable, destructive, and horrific. The people who founded Canada, would have agreed with the colonialism, and it's really important to have discussions about that and what happened at that time, how people felt, and the repercussions for those actions that have hurt the lives of many and continue to hurt them today. However, I also celebrate Canada Day. I believe that you can both celebrate Canada Day as a celebration of multiculturalism and what the country stands for today, while also acknowledging the effects of colonialism and the effects of neocolonialism that still affect us today. So I would have voted no.
Thank you. Annie, same question.
Can you please repeat it?
Of course. How would you have voted on the motion to not celebrate Canada Day if you were on exec at the time, and why?
Yeah, so I too am an Indigenous student, and I would have voted not to have Canada Day celebrated at the time. I too, like Ali, don't celebrate Canada Day myself, but I do believe what Ali said does hold importance in the fact that just because I don't necessarily celebrate Canada Day doesn't mean that other students on campus don't celebrate Canada Day. I think that moving forward, Canada Day, if chosen to be celebrated on campus, there comes with a certain educational component to that and a certain acknowledgement, and I think that that is maybe the part that was missed this time that is imperative to have moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Veer, same question.
I would have voted no. That's because, like, in a way, some people within the community might not feel comfortable celebrating it, or they might not necessarily feel like respected when that's celebrated. So I think it's important to keep in mind like all the individuals' like preferences and thoughts, and then at the same time, like if people want to celebrate it themselves, like they should be allowed to. It's just that the student union shouldn't fund celebrations like that that may affect other people in a negative way.
Thank you. And Mitch, same question. Of course. How would you have voted on the motion to not celebrate Canada Day if you were on exec at the time, and why?
I personally would have voted no to that motion. I don't think that the DSU needs to take such a hard stance on certain issues like this within the student body. I think that taking a stance to not support Canada Day alienates a large population of students on campus. I think there's a much better way to approach this subject and this situation through conversation, through that education piece, and through supporting those students that don't feel like they are supported by events and activities around Canada Day. I think taking that approach and not taking such a hardline stance doesn't alienate students while also giving you the chance to support and create conversation around why some students feel uncomfortable around Canada Day.
Thank you. So candidates, considering that this is the last question and it's also a very controversial question, I want everyone's voices to be heard. You'll have a 10-minute discussion. You don't have to use the whole time, but there's 10-minute discussion available. Candidates will get 1 minute to speak uninterrupted. If candidates try to talk at the same time, one will speak, the other will immediately follow. Anyone may begin now.
There was a lot of controversy surrounding this motion. However, I think a lot of people forget that when the amendments were made, that there was an educational component to this. That when DISC was brought to the table through the Indigenous student rep, the position that I held, we introduced the educational component at the end, which allowed for members of the union to celebrate Canada Day. However, it meant that the union would not be celebrating or putting on events themselves. I think it's important that we respect that we each have different relationships to Canada. And for myself, just talking about how I choose not to celebrate Canada Day is because my relationship to Canada is a lot different than others. And recognizing and honoring these differences in relationships, I think that's how this could have been handled a lot differently. And yeah.
Yeah, I really like the fact that Mitch brought out is that I really wouldn't have felt comfortable at all voting on that kind of measure because taking a hard stance on whether to celebrate Canada Day or not kind of opens a Schrodinger's box of where you immediately create a side of campus that would be for the motion and then for against. Creating that kind of division can be really harmful and also has the side effect of eliminating the possibility of educating people about why people choose not to celebrate Canada Day. Because I definitely think that choosing not to celebrate Canada Day can be done for extremely legitimate reasons, even though I choose to celebrate it myself. And I would definitely respect anyone's position not to celebrate Canada Day if they so choose, and I'm very understanding as to why.
If there's no more discussion on this issue, then we will move on to closing statements. So we'll do it in the same order that we did for opening statements. So candidates will get 2 minutes, considering we have a lot of time left. So candidates will get 2 minutes for closing statements, and Veer, you are first.
So for my closing statement, I'd just like to reiterate what I've said throughout. So I've recognized that there's a lot of people that are not really engaged with the DSU. I've spoken to people myself, and it's also abundantly clear from last year's voting polls. And should I be elected, it would be my goal to increase this engagement with the DSU, increase the value of DSU in our community, in our society, another issue that I also kind of talked about was about like societies, and that's been brought up throughout the debate, that societies don't really have a strong, healthy relationships with our current like DSU. So I think that also could be changed, and that would be one of my goals, to change that as well, by increasing more transparency and openness in communication, and just really like being equal, and just acknowledging and like valuing each and every person's word, and treating them equally. Yeah.
Thank you. Samuel, you're next.
Yeah, so just as my final statement, just to wrap up all of what my positions are, I really see a value in increasing engagement with society and students. The low participation, I think, is a reflection of the general apathy towards the student union that we have on campus. And increasing voter participation is paramount to my success as a VPI, I think. If I didn't at least double it, I think that would be a failure. And having more students participate, I think, is the best way to heal relations that we have on campus. If everyone's participating in their union, then they feel like they're being represented. And that's why it's so important to make sure that the executive at the DSU is apolitical. Because while it's so important to support political movements on campus, picking sides, as we've seen this summer, just creates divisiveness and eliminates any possibility to educate other students about the other side, because we've picked a side and there's no turning back from there. So, yeah, that's how we'll end it.
Thank you. Annie, you're next.
So once again, thank you for everyone that showed up tonight, and then those who are watching at home, and for all the lovely questions you asked us this evening. In terms of what my little last pitch is, I just want to say once again, my name was Annie Shannon Dwyer. I am in my 4th year in recreation therapy here at Dalhousie. I am running for the VPI position. My platform points are improving access to the resources that exist, as well as adding to those resources on campus, connecting campuses, as well as promoting off-campus student initiatives and turning ideas into action. So once again, thank you for all your support for coming out. It's been a great time to be up here with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Mitch, closing statements.
Yeah, I would just like to end it by saying, yeah, my name's Mitch Mulhall. I'm a 3rd-year biochemistry student here on campus. Coming into the position, I really want to give a voice to those students that feel like they weren't represented on the DSU this past year, and really open those channels for more engagement and more student involvement in the DSU. I really want to lead to accessibility in its resources, accessibility for students, and accessibility in the executive positions. More engagement with those students on campus through outreach, through partnership programming with other executives, and through collaboration with different societies on campus. And then I also want to be there as a support to societies and a support to students, so that they feel comfortable approaching the DSU, coming to the DSU, and having a way that they can feel supported and represented on campus. So yeah, thank you everyone for coming out tonight, for listening, and I hope that we have a great voter turnout this year at the elections. Thank you.
Thank you. And Dali, closing statements.
Hi, everyone. I just want to thank you all again for coming out tonight, as well as for everyone who will be watching at home. Just to say a little bit about my platform. So I'm here to help enhance society resources, improve equity services, as well as implement strategic outreach. I'd really appreciate your vote. I think that coming into the position of Vice President Internal, it's extremely important to have someone who has experience, someone who is knowledgeable about DSU policies, as well as how they can implement these strategies in order to make a better union. On March 12th and 13th, please vote for me, Ali Barnaby, for VPI.
Thank you. So let's give a hand to all the candidates that came here tonight and participated in the debate. I want to thank everybody who came out here to participate, as well as everybody who will eventually watch this online. Our next debate will be in Cameron Dining Room Hall for VPFO. I encourage everyone to come out and see that debate as well. I want to thank my colleagues on the Elections Committee, as well as our CRO, Caitlin. My name is Mark Joycey. I'm your moderator, and have a good night. Thank you.
Tech crew.
Yeah, thanks, Mark.